Joko. We're joined now by the Community Secretary Eric Pickles from Chelmsford and by Labour's Shadow Communities Minister Jack Dromey, who's with us in the studio. Eric Pickles, let me come to you first. If I can see you, Mr. Pickles, are you there? Do we have? There you go, Eric Pickles. I thought you had disappeared for a moment there. You had fallen into the Chelmsford mists. But we've got you. Mr. Pickles, could you explain to our viewers why is it wrong for Labour to freeze electricity prices, but right for the Tories to freeze rail prices?
Well, of course, we've done it for the last 2 years and still been able to put in a fair bit of investment to the railways, which I think has been a good thing. But it's kind of a recognition as we come out of Labour's Great Recession that those who work hard, that have to commute, that we are on regulated fares. We're prepared to freeze them for a further period.
But those who work hard also have to pay their utility bills. Why would it be wrong to freeze electricity bills if you can freeze rail fares?
Well, we're able to freeze rail fares and put in investment in.
What's wrong with freezing electricity prices then as well?
We can't. Well, if we freeze electricity prices, it would have meant that electricity prices would have been artificially high. That was the problem of freezing electricity prices.
That wasn't what you said at the time.
Labour put in their freeze since it's exactly with great respect, Mr. Neil, it's exactly what we said at the time. The level of energy prices have dropped, and if we'd frozen energy prices at that time, we would have found ourselves having to pay for more for energy because of Labour's freeze.
It's not actually true. Energy prices were rising when Mr. Miliband announced the policy. They subsequently fell, but that's a different issue. How much would this cost to freeze rail fares?
Remember, it's only regulated rail fares we're talking about, so we're not talking about first-class fares, and it's already in, I think, what's called the baseline. We've already announced it for the year coming. So we're talking about increasing it for the rest of the... I don't have those figures precisely in front of me.
Well, you've announced a policy and you don't know how much it's going to cost. It's another uncosted Tory promise.
Well, you'd asked me to come on to talk about something entirely separately, but I suppose there are other policies you could ask me about. All I can say is that we've already frozen it for 2 years. We announced we're going to freeze it for this year. We've put in record levels of investment, and we intend to continue to do so.
Well, I put it to you, it's going to cost $1.8 billion over the lifetime of the next Parliament, and it will be paid for by borrowing and higher taxes.
And I put it to you that you can only arrive at those figures if you put in the amount for unregulated fares, including first class.
Except these are not my figures, Mr. Pickles. They're the figures of Patrick McLaughlin, the Conservative Transport Secretary. He said that on August the 1st, 2014. Was he wrong?
I can't imagine any circumstances where Mr. McLaughlin would be wrong.
So it will cost almost $2 billion.
And repeat it very straightforward that in terms of unregulated fares are not subject to this. It's only regulated fares.
Yeah, but that's most fares. Most people don't travel first class.
But there are other unregulated fares, and that we've been able. There are record numbers of people travelling on the railways, and
that'll make it even more expensive if you freeze the fares. Then
we've been able to put in record investment on that.
All right, Mr. Dromey.
Well, thank you.
No, don't go away. Stay where you are. If it's right to freeze electricity prices, why don't you freeze rail prices?
You'll have to wait for our manifesto next week when we will
give us a clue.
When we will set out our, if you just use the bad pun, direction of travel. But what we just heard from Eric is the latest example of this election campaign of fantasy figures on the one hand and uncosted pledges on the other. And to help Eric, because I looked in detail at what was said by Patrick McLaughlin, it was exactly that, 1.8 billion that was supported then by the department, who set out in detail why they said that was the figure.
He might have thought inflation was going to be... It looked like inflation was going to be higher when he made it.
Well, now
inflation's basically zero now. They may be assuming there ain't going to be any inflation in the next Parliament.
Now we discover that there's a pledge made, and with the greatest respect to Eric, floundering in terms of actually arguing how much will it cost. Now, it either costs £1.8 billion, Eric, or it doesn't.
All right, but let's come back to Labour's policy. Are you going to stick to Mr Miliband's promise of August 2014 of a tough cap on rail fares?
You will have to wait for our manifesto in terms of...
Well, why can't you at least give us some kind of indication, since he's already promised it? Would you agree then that if he does not have a tough cap on rail fares in the manifesto, he will have reneged on a promise he gave last summer?
No, because we will act on fares as we've acted on electricity bills. You'll have to wait for our manifesto next week, when we will spell out how.
Is there anything else you'd like to freeze, Mr Pickles? What about our water bills or bus fares? I mean, if Labour and Tory between them can freeze all these, I mean, why not just freeze prices in general? Roy Hattersley tried to do that in the 1970s, so why not have another go at that?
We thought it was sensible to freeze rail prices. We've done it for the past 2 years. We're making a commitment to do it. We're also making a commitment to continue to invest in the railways. That's why more people are using the railways. That's why the level of investment in the railways is at record levels, and I think that's something that we should be very pleased about.
It is a subsidy to the middle classes, isn't it? Because the people who spend most commuting and commuting the longest distances tend to be in the southeast of England, coming into London. They pay quite big commuting fares to do that. They're generally average incomes and above, and so therefore it's a subsidy to your home county's voters, by and large. Correct?
Well, as you know, one of the pleasing growth in the railways has been the growth of the railways in the north of England, and that's why we're looking to invest more in the north of England in terms of rail routes, because there's been quite a considerable increase in that, and of course people who live there will also benefit from that. But it seems a reasonable thing to do. And I dare say, if the prices had gone up, then you would have been telling me what a disaster it would have been.
Well, as you know, Mr Pickles, it's my job to take whatever you think and take the opposite line. And that's what I do with everybody who hears
Mr Neil, you're absolutely,
But
Mr Neil, you're
Eric,
impeccable in your fairness.
To pay for this, you're either going to have to put up taxes or cut even deeper than you're proposing to cut at the next stages.
Why will they have to do that?
Because they've got to fund £1.8 billion.
Well, that's if the McLaughlin figure is still an accurate figure. But if inflation, which is currently zero, and the Bank of England is assuming will show no signs of life for the next 3 years, then it wouldn't cost so much.
The Patrick McLaughlin figure
it could be out of date.
As I understand, they've not gone back on it, the Conservatives.
Well, they've not had a chance
perhaps they can come out...
Mr Pickles has just gone back on it. He doesn't think it'll cost £1.8 billion.
No, he hasn't. He doesn't know what Patrick McLaughlin
back. Mr Pickles, you don't think it'll cost £1.8 billion, do you?
Has it been revised, Eric?
I have nothing to believe that it will cost £1.8 billion. And I suppose if we're talking in terms of costing, it was pretty clear last night that Labour are thinking in terms of hiking up the price of diesel and of petrol at the pumps, because they couldn't give a commitment not to increase the escalator. So, you know, these things go both ways. But we have been clear. We'll invest in the railways and we'll freeze the regulated price.
All right. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Eric Pickles in Chelmsford. Though I think he's going to stay with that's it on rail fares, but he's now going to speak on something else.
He is, which I'm going to tell you about.
Very well. Can't wait.
The big Conservative announcement today has the ring of the big society about it. Remember that? They say they would allow 15 million people to take 3 days' leave to volunteer under a new Tory government. It's an opportunity that would apply to every employee of any company with 250 or more workers and everyone employed in the public sector. People can volunteer to assist such charities, such as serving as a school governor. The Conservatives say this will create up to 360 million extra volunteering hours. But is there public appetite for this idea? The Tories say 41% of workers say they would give more time or money to charity if their employer gave them the time to do so. Well, Eric Pickles and Jack Dromey are still here, and we're joined by Christian May from the Institute of Directors. Welcome to the Daily Politics. First of all, though, Eric Pickles, I thought you'd binned the big society.
The big society has been quite successful. There are, I think, just slightly in excess of 3 million more volunteers than there was when we first came into office. The number of volunteers did dip under Labour. And whether it's things like neighbourhood plans, or whether it's been community rights, or whether it's been community organisers, we've actually been gradually pushing this out, and this is the next logical step, which builds on what a number of very large employers already do, and which is quite common now in the public sector.
Right, but I mean, we haven't heard of the big society for ages, years, I put it to you. I mean, the committee on which you sat to organise the big society was set up in the summer of 2010. The last ever meeting was in March 2011. And Michael Gove said on Newsnight this week he didn't think we would hear about the big society in the campaign at all. So why is it suddenly being resurrected today?
Well, let's take something as straightforward as neighbourhood planning, which I have responsibility. Yeah. Nearly 10% of the population is now covered by a neighbourhood plan, either there or in preparation. That's been an enormous change in terms of
that may be, but Eric, because we don't hear about the big society.
But well, let me tell you some more. Let's look in terms of the amount of money that we put into Youth United, trying to get youth groups in parts of the country that traditionally don't have them. That's not only been a success, it's actually exceeded its numbers. So that's another example. Okay. Let's talk about community organisers, which is £20 million worth in terms of us putting out there. That's been a very big success.
So we're going to hear more about it in this campaign? Are we going to hear lots more about the big starting campaign, or is it, I put to you, because the negative campaigning of this week, the backstabbing comments about Ed Miliband, that just hasn't worked? So you've come up with a slightly sunnier, more positive term. Your big society's made it back on the agenda.
Well, I am a byword of sunniness and positivity. I will, of course, concede that point to you. But I mean, this has been planned for some time. It's been built on something that's worked rather well. I'm speaking to you from Essex. Essex County Council has a scheme like this. It works. It's very good.
Right, great. Well, I'm glad you are the byword for sunny times in this campaign. Christian May, is this a good idea? Are employers going to welcome the fact that they are going to have to pay for or find the money, or taxpayers are going to have to find the money for 3 days of volunteering if employees want it?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's a question of finding the money. If this is the return of the big society, it could prove to be a rather expensive resurrection. Leaving aside the public sector costs of hundreds of thousands of people potentially taking up this offer, 250 employees does not make you a major employer. There are some huge firms who do have schemes like this in place. This announcement will just formalise their arrangements, and certainly volunteering is to be encouraged. Business is an intrinsic part of society, big or otherwise, from the get-go. And a lot of businesses have a huge footprint in their local area, their time and their resources and their expertise that they give to all sorts of projects. So I think this is an example of somebody pulling a lever and hoping that it will result in a magnificent transformation. But of course, in reality, there will be significant costs to be borne in this policy.
Right, and who's going to bear the costs, Eric Pickles?
Well, you would think that this doesn't happen. This happens fairly regularly.
Yeah, by
Department
choice.
of Health gives 5 days a week. Department of Education gives 5. Local authorities do that. Lots of firms do that. I've been contacted by a number of very small firms this morning saying, "Why are you leaving us out of this scheme?" I think most employers would get something out of this, and most employers would get something out of this.
But who's going to pay for it? That was my question.
the same people who pay for annual leave. You would organise this in the same way as you organise the annual leave. But instead of going away on holiday, you would spend 3 days over the year doing something else for society. And I think that you would get, I think, a more committed employee.
Right. Well, that of course is arguable. But so you're saying it's going to replace people's annual leave? They're going to have to take 3 days of their annual leave if they want to do the voluntary. It's not over and above.
No, I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying anything remotely close to that.
Right.
I'm not saying anything that could be misinterpreted as saying of that. This is additional to your annual
right.
leave,
Okay,
but
well,
you would
fine.
arrange it in the same
that's
way
the crux of the
as
policy,
you would.
isn't it?
Okay,
Yeah.
as long as we're clear on that.
Yeah, well, we'll be clear on that, but that's the point. We still haven't got to the bottom about who is actually going to pay. So businesses will have to bear the burden.
They certainly will. The idea that there are no costs to bear when you're extending annual leave from 28 days to 31 paid annual leave, that is a major policy. You can leave aside what people are doing on those 3 additional days. It's frankly an irrelevance. What employers are going to see here is that they're now taking your annual leave from 28 days to 31, and they're going to have to pay for that.
Right, trade unions love this idea, Jack Dromey. Well, I mean, it is going to add something, isn't it, to society and to people who want to be able to broaden their horizons and put something back to community. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing to volunteer. By the way, 2 days ago on Newsnight, Michael Gove said, we've moved on from the big society. 2 days later, we have a back of a fag packet policy with Eric unable to say exactly who's going to have to pay the bill. Now, in my own constituency, we've got the Jaguar plant, and the Jaguar has got excellent roots in the local community. Jaguar workers are engaged in community initiatives the whole time. So that we should encourage companies and the public sector to play a part in society, absolutely. But Eric is typical again, makes a commitment, but without being able to explain for one moment who is going to pay for it and how much it will cost.
I mean, it is a bit strange, Eric Pickles, that a Conservative, and if a Conservative government comes through after the election, is going to be imposing regulation on business. This is a Conservative.
Yeah, but forgive me, this is already happening.
Yes, but you're going to legislate. But you're going to legislate for this.
It's already happening, and this and all this does is just simply put it onto regulate. I'm really sorry, I can't hear what people are saying down the line. If people keep, I'll wait until someone asks me a question. I can't really hear you.
You can't really. Well, I'm sorry if you can't actually hear me. Hopefully, you can hear me. I'm going to
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, you can hear me now. Well, I'm just going to ask some of the other people in the studio. I mean, will you give up 3 days and volunteer, Kevin?
No, I like the idea. Probably worry Eric Pickles. I do like the idea, but there is a cost either to a private firm or us as taxpayers through public services of nurses, doctors, police officers, teachers go off. But I'm very surprised, and I think it's kind of typical of the Conservative campaign and the confusion in it. You announce 2 policies on the same day and they begin to crowd each other out. Both don't seem to be properly funded, although I accept it won't be 1.8 billion on train fares, but nevertheless there will be a cost. And then you're putting what Eric Pickles, if Labour proposed this, Eric Pickles would call it a burden on business.
Right. Is just finally, if they're putting something that is a choice at the moment, it seems to me, why put it into law, or why sort of force companies to do it in that sense?
Yeah, we're talking about mandatory volunteering. I think, as Mr. Pickles says, the fact that this is already happening.
The fact that this is already happening.
I think it was Lord Lawson who said that where it's not necessary.
Hang on, Eric. I'll come back to you at the end.
Where it's not necessary to legislate, it is necessary not to legislate. And I think if there is a voluntary system in place here, and certainly the IOD would be all for incentivising this with employees and supporting it. But
all right, Eric Pickles, answer that point. I hope you could hear Christian May there.
I'm afraid I couldn't hear what Christian May was saying. But I would point out that this already happens. This will give people a chance to put something back into society, and I think it's a way of recognising that those who work hard are prepared to put something back in, that the government will back them.
Is it a vote winner?
No, I really don't understand why they're launching this on the day of a sort of big retail offer. And also, if you're a good firm, you're probably going to be doing this anyway. And you don't even need your business as a person. I volunteer, but I do it in my spare time. I've got weekends, I've already got holidays, I've got evenings. There's an opportunity to do it. The government, if they want to encourage a stronger civic society, should be making it easier for businesses to do it, not forcing businesses to do it, maybe even in a sort of tokenistic way.
Jack Dromey, Christian May, we'll let you go at this point. Eric Pickles, thank you very much.
Yeah, don't forget Eric.
I was just coming to it.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the difficulty of the line.
No, don't worry, that's not your fault.
Well, whose fault?